What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be taking a look at the cameras and lenses that I work with every single day. One thing that's a little different about Leica gear is that compared to Sony or Canon or Nikon, this gear is incredibly expensive. Now let's get real, it's all very expensive, but the Leica stuff is like next level expensive. And I kind of want to buy it and be done. One of the biggest advantages to the M system is that while the cameras go back 60, 70 years and into the future will likely continue to go 60, 70 plus years if we haven't all burned away by then. The lenses will follow that camera line indefinitely into the future and allows you to use your same lenses on cameras from the past. So the search for the right lenses that are in the right style for you is actually probably the most important part of your Leica kit. I tried a few different lenses at a few different focal lengths, but I want to tell you today about where I landed and why I landed there. But before that, we're going to talk about my cameras. And I'm going to start with this camera that is from the 1980s, the Leica M6. This is probably Leica's most popular camera in their entire lineup. And that's because it's been around for now 40 years or so. This one in particular is referred to often as the big logo version. It's got this giant M6 on it, whereas other ones might say Leica M6 with it being smaller or have script on the top. This has none of that. It just has this giant M6 here. And of course, I've covered the red dot, as I do with all my Leica cameras, with a little sticker. This is not a TTL camera, it's just a standard M6, but it is incredibly clean and has worked flawless for me through many rolls of film. This is not meant to be a camera review, so I'm not going to go into all the details and specs about this camera. There's plenty of those, or maybe I'll do one from my perspective in the future. But this is an incredible camera, works great, and it is identical to my M10R, which is next up in our line here. The M10R is an incredible digital Leica camera. Before this, I had the M10, but I just needed a little more megapixels for the way that I shoot, and I know that the M10 with 24 megapixels is plenty for most people, but I needed a little more resolution for cropping in because I don't have a macro lens for some fine details, and so I need to crop when I'm doing some commercial work on products, and so this gives me the ability to do so. And I also think that perhaps there will be a day where I will talk about why I chose the M10R over the M11. But I did make that decision, both were available, and I went with the M10R instead. This camera kind of scared me in the beginning, and you may recall an earlier video I did, I will link it above, where I was really concerned that I made a big mistake switching from the M10 to the M10R. But ever since that video, this camera has been flawless for me in every way and has held up through traveling and several professional shoots and other shoots as well. And so this camera has been fantastic. If you were to glance at the M6 and the M10R side by side, you're gonna see that they are almost identical in size. They're almost identical in the way they feel in the hands. You know, of course you have differences because one's a film camera and one's a newer digital camera, but from my experience of shooting these two together, it is just a complete flawless and seamless experience to grab one or the other and just whatever I feel like shooting. It is a very much the same experience to me, as much as it could be going from digital to film or film to digital. These two cameras have been my primary cameras since I picked them up. And so I've only been shooting the M10R for about 6 months, and it has just been fantastic. Before that, I was using the M10, but I would say the experience is identical. I just have a little more resolution on the M10R. Next up, I've got the Q2. The Q2 might be the camera that will be leaving me maybe later this year or next. And it won't be because I want to go to the Q3. In fact, it's actually to simplify things a little bit. I don't know if I need two digital bodies that do the same thing. I'm thinking about actually getting a 28 lens for my M10R and going at it that way. But for right now, I'm using the Q2 mostly for some commercial work, but also to chase my kids around and take everyday photos. The autofocus is a nice feature, and I relied on it heavily in the beginning of my Leica M system shooting because I just wasn't as fast with that manual focus as I feel like I am today at getting it dialed in really fast. There's just something about autofocus autofocus that as I get older, I want to use less and less. That's more of a philosophical conversation that may come in later, but I currently still haven't used the Q2. I mostly use it in monochrome mode. This is not a monochrome camera, but I use the monochrome through the viewfinder in the back. I shoot monochrome JPEG as well as RAW and kind of pick what I want to do with that. It's a fantastic camera with a fantastic lens. It's got the 28 Summilux built into it, but again, it may be leaving, so maybe you can talk me into it or out of it. So those are my three cameras, the Leica M6, the Leica M10R, and the Leica Q2. Now let's talk about my lenses. This was the very first lens I bought for the M system when I got my M10. This is a Voigtlander Ultron Vintage, or the VM, version 2. This lens is absolutely tiny and it looks great on the camera. It's a 35mm, which is my favorite focal length. It's got a nice focus tab on the bottom, which I love these focus tabs because I've got pretty big hands and it's easy to grab it. Tiny lens, has a lot of 3D pop to it. It's fantastic and it's cheap for lenses. It's cheap for Leica lenses especially. Great lens, currently have it listed for sale. And that's because as much as I love the size, weight, and experience, and honestly the look of this little Voigtlander, what I really dreamed of shooting with was a 35 Summilux. And I just happened to get one pretty recently. The 35 Summilux has this built-in hood. It just looks so classic when I put it on either my M6 or my M10R. This lens has so much pop to it, especially when you get down below like f4, it starts to really have tons of pop, and that's kind of part of the Leica look. And I've got a video planned to get into that philosophical idea of what the Leica look is, but this lens is so iconic to me in its look, and some of my favorite photographers, as I've looked at like endless amounts of people that shoot Leica, it always comes back. It's the 35 Summilux that I just look at their photos and absolutely love. And I'm so stoked that I could finally get my hands on one. This is not the current generation of the Summilux. It has the close focusing. This is the FLE that was before that one, but it works great. It's beautiful, has the same look as the newer one, and it was significantly less money thanks to the used market. The 35 Summilux fits on the M6 and the M10R. As I mentioned before, you can use the same lenses on both systems, and so it is a fantastic lens. Love the look of it. Could not be happier with it. Only thing I will say is, once you start getting down into those faster speeds, you pay for it with size, because this is a much bigger lens than this little Voigtlander Ultron. So on the bottom end of the focal range, we've got the 28mm on the Q2. Now I'm on the M system and I just showed you the 35. Next up on the M system is the 50 Summilux, and this one is the newer one that has close focusing. I actually had the Summilux version before this one, and they truly are the same lens. There was no visible difference in between the older Summilux and this Summilux with the close focusing, but this one does allow for closer focusing, and for my commercial work, especially shooting flat lays, it is pretty important that I can get as close to some objects as I possibly can. This lens is incredible. It is a Summilux. It is that Leica punch and classic Leica look, and I couldn't be happier with it. Love this lens, and again, the film or the digital camera, it's at home on both and looks fantastic on both cameras. And the photos I get with this, they have that look that I love, which is why I shoot Leica in the first place. Before this though, I had the 50 Summicron, the f2 Summicron, I believe version 5. Fantastic lens. It just wasn't what I wanted with the close focusing, and also the ability to push it down to 1.4 for portrait sessions or whatever. I just really wanted that extra speed, and I wanted the close focusing. So my Summicron found a new home, and I now have the Summilux. So I've got the 28, the 35, and 50 all rated as a Summilux, which is pretty sweet. Now, I'm a big believer that no matter what system you shoot, you want to have 3 different focal lengths available to you. Whether you have that in one zoom lens, it can kind of hit them all, or you do that with primes. I really only shoot primes, and so I have my wide, which is that 28. On the M system, 35, though 35 isn't extremely wide. I wouldn't really call it a wide. It's kind of somewhere in between like wide and mid. But I do think it's important to have a wide, a mid, and a tight. So for me, the 35 on the M system is my widest lens. The mid would be the 50, and then I get into the tight. And for me, there were a lot of options that I tried. I went to Leica SF and Camera West and tried several different versions of a 90. And where I landed after testing them all was actually the cheapest one, which is the Leica 90 Summarit. These lenses get crapped on all the time. They made it in a 35, a 50, and a 90. I believe there may be more, but I'm pretty sure that might be the only focal lengths they made them in. But people really don't like these lenses. They are Leica branded, and they do, to me, have a Leica look to them. But this 90 Summarit, it's actually a wonderful lens. It's not huge. Let's compare it to the 50 Summilux, and you'll see it's just a touch bigger than the 50 Summilux. Now they made two versions of this lens. They made one that went down to 2.4 and one that went down to 2.5. I think the 2.4 one might be a little newer. I have the one that goes to 2.5. This whole hood cap system's pretty neat. You unscrew it off, flip it around, you screw it back on, and you've got this giant lens hood on it. And then the cap can go right over that. So typically when I'm out shooting, this is on that way and it's stuck down in my bag. I don't shoot tight all the time, but I do like having a Leica lens at 90 mil that just gets the job done, looks good, and was inexpensive compared to the other Leica lenses that I have. This little 90 Summarit has worked fantastic for me through portraits, or honestly anything I've used it on. It's just been great to capture the stuff that I shoot. Because I'm not shooting tight all the time at this focal length, I didn't want to completely invest in it. Maybe there will come a day where I'll grab a 90 Apo or something, but for right now, this is getting the job done and doing all that I need. The last part of my Leica kit isn't really a piece of Leica gear, but just looks right on my setup here. So let me put a camera rig together for you. Let's take the M10R. Let's throw my 50 on it. So I've got my M10R with the 50 mil on it, and I picked up this Godox Lux Junior Flash. I don't do a ton of flash photography, but if I wanted to get into it, this just has a vibe. It looks good, it's small, it feels at home on the M system. I would say that if you have a silver M camera, it would feel more at home, but I was looking for just a small flash, just for fun stuff if I'm out at night. This is it. And you literally just put it on the hot shoe and do a couple of little dial settings in the back, and then you're ready to go. Very easy to use. And again, it just looks like it's supposed to be there. It's got a vibe. So to kind of wrap this up, this is the gear that I'm currently using, and I am pretty well invested at this point into my Leica system. The camera bodies are the M6 and the M10R, and my lenses are the 35 and the 50 Summilux and the 90 Summarit, and of course on the Q2, the 28 Summilux as well. But like I said, the Q2 may or may not be with me much longer. I hope you found this video to be informative, and if you are in the process of building out your Leica kit, drop a comment below and share what you're looking at, or maybe what you're trying to figure out for yourself. If this is your first time on the channel, just a welcome to you. If you like this kind of content, be sure to subscribe. I'm getting back into the rhythm now of prioritizing YouTube because summer's coming to an end pretty soon, which is crazy because 2023 has felt like a blink of an eye. But I've got a lot of videos coming over the next few weeks and months and the rest of the year, so be sure to subscribe and stick around for them. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.